Hello, and welcome to the Rey and Crystal show. That's
Right.
right. Yes, we are Rey and Crystal, and we will someday upgrade to a unified, formalized intro. But yeah, how you doing this week, Rey?
I'm exhausted. I think this eclipse knocked me out, to be honest. I feel like the eclipse was on Tuesday, and it just feels like everything the day after, fell through. Ooh, just
Rude.
crumbled, including me.
Yeah, man, I was like crying and like just like processing a lot during the eclipse. And then I was expected to like go back to work. And I was just like, yo, like I cannot do this right now. I was like also kind of behind in work because of like the energy of all that. But yeah, like just a lot came up last week. So this week is going to be a lot quieter because the main thing to talk about is the fact that Mercury is going to Scorpio, or Mercury just went to Scorpio as of whoever's listening to this. And Mars is going to retrograde. So the Mars in retrograde is in my seventh house and it's in your third house, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So how do you feel about the upcoming Mars in retrograde happening?
Um, it's interesting because we have Mars in a Mercury ruled sign now it's been with Mars being in Gemini, and then we have Mercury in a Mars ruled sign as of today, the 29th, while we're recording. So there's a little bit of mutual reception there where Mars and Mercury, there's kind of some tension, or at least some kind of like dance. Whenever I think of Mars and Mercury, I think of like dancing because that's either like ballet, like just moving your body in like a really creative and like, flexible way, or it can be like dancing with fire, like literally like spinning it. And um, we've all seen fire dancing. I think it's cool. It's really cool. um, but that's kind of the energy I feel like that we have is either dancing with fire or dancing really methodically and carefully. With Mars and Gemini, there's been a lot of talk with like conversations and words being used as either weapons or as tools, and learning how to fight. Mars learning how to fight those battles with the weapons that they have, and Gemini, which is curiosity and flexibility and openness, and also argument. I mean, just arguing in and of itself is a really good way to learn. And I think Mars is pretty happy learning that way too.
Yeah, I feel like if I think about like natal Mars and Gemini energy, which I know a lot of people with that specific placement, they like to fight like with their words. They will basically just like talk you to death if like they feel so inclined to beat down. And my Mars is also in a Mercury ruled sign, which is Virgo. And I kind of relate to like how I think in both instances, it's like keeping the score for both types of Marses. Like in order to like fight, you have to remember what's going on half the time. And yeah, I feel like I've sharpened while Mars was in Gemini for better or for worse. And so I'm like not sure what the retrograde will implicate, but it does make me think that I'm going to be like more inclined to like use that like impulse when I generally like refrain from it. But I do also think about how my natal Mars is in retrograde, and my whole life I've just really like held my tongue, even though inside I can feel myself burning up from like anger over someone's bullshit. And I just feel like I associate Mars in retrograde as like it's the opposite of however your relationship to dealing with shit is. If you deal with it a certain way, you'll go the other way. So I feel like it might impact everyone's um ability to handle conflict differently, I think.
Yeah, definitely finding new ways to handle it and new ways to talk about it and deal with it. And it's also interesting too, because you mentioned your natal Mars, because it's in Virgo, so it's also in another Mercury ruled sign. And so we're talking about like holding our tongue, and how that can create like that fire inside of you where it's not healthy to not say anything, but it's
Oh.
also like, yeah, trying to learn to find the words. And there's a quote or a mantra or whatever that I was told that I was recently, as far as speaking, your mind, and it's like, let me speak, let me speak my truth with grace.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about that a lot, especially in this kind of context. And you were talking about people, you have friends with Mars and Gemini, and the first friend I thought of that has that, it's conjunct Venus at the same time. So it's like they're very much someone who can verbally set like a boundary, but it's very pleasant. It's with a smile. It's very much like, actually that's not correct, but this is correct, and that's okay. And it's like that very like assertiveness of Mars, but it's still pleasant at the same time with Venus. And so I think it's interesting to see how this time will go without that Venetian influence. If
Yeah,
it's just,
I, I
yeah,
I had never thought about how holding my tongue creates fire, because I always assumed that because I have a Leo moon that's like very late degree, and so it's very loosely conjunct my Mars in 0 degrees Virgo. I'd always assumed that like because of that, I felt the burn from Leo. I never thought about how like my action of like not saying something would cause the burn to be like more intense. But I think how it manifested for a long time in my life was I would have a lot of like aggression towards how I wanted to prove myself to the world. So like as opposed to having aggression towards other people, I would just take it out on like myself and like my approach to like things. I think also just having like a Mars in retrograde, I would constantly doubt if I was like worthy of like even having a real conflict. Like if someone's yelling at me, can I yell back? Can I be mad back? Can there be more than one mad person in this room? And I feel
yeah,
like with Mars and Gemini, I can see the two sides of it are, oh, like conflict is fucking valid either way. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like if I ask myself, I'm actually quite excited for like Mars in retrograde, because I feel like whenever I've had like I just never felt like the conventional negativity around retrogrades, because we see that in like how society talks about Mercury in retrograde, which I think is more like disruptive in some ways, but like the outer planets, I just feel like give you like slow burn realizations, and I'm craving those constantly. Um, yeah. Oh, and also because Jupiter just went direct, or sorry, no, Jupiter didn't go direct. Jupiter just went to Pisces and going to be direct later this month. But Jupiter and Mars will both be in retrograde. What do you think of that?
well, as we mentioned, Aries rising, Moon in Pisces, very much feel a lot of Jupiter
12,000.
and a lot of Mars.
12th house. It went
Uh,
from your first house Jupiter to a 12th house Jupiter.
yeah. Um, I mean, personally, I love when Jupiter's in Pisces. That was one of my favorite times of year. I think it was around the spring last time it was, either this year or last year. Um, I thought it was so fun. I think when it's a little different for me too, because my moon is there and my moon's at like a later degrees in Pisces. So it's I think it might actually I should probably see it's gonna get pretty close to my moon because I think it's at 23, 25 degrees.
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, I find in those times there's a lot of escapism and a lot of creativity and a lot of just I don't know, just wonderful. Like I'm able to just like get invested in a video game and just fully divest from reality. Um,
Wow.
oh my gosh, hold on, we're talking about this. I just realized I played GTA last night for the first time in I think like since around the spring, and I was playing with a friend during the same time. And
Jupiter.
then Saturn went direct in my 11th. Yeah.
Yeah, Jupiter and Pisces. Woohoo. I'm going to play Grand Theft.
It's just
I'm
really good for
going
creativity and
to
escapism and yeah.
I think it's interesting how it forms like a subtle square to the Mars and Gemini with Jupiter and Pisces, and they're both in
Mhm.
retrograde. So like, yeah, I don't know. What's funny is Kanye West has both a Gemini sun and a Pisces moon. So
Oh.
his life is in
I didn't
retrograde
know that.
right now. He's like losing like his $1 billion brand deals, and it's like, ooh. But like, I have a feeling he'll like come out and like some greater truth will be illuminated through him. But like, is that going to show up in my life? I don't know. But I will say that like, because Mars is on my descendant and Jupiter's in my fourth house, that I feel like my sense of safety in relationships has been kind of not like off, because I just moved to a new city. I'm actually really enjoying the new relationships I have, but like I think my existential turmoil and like examining my past in all of that, like I think all of it came up during the Scorpio eclipse. And so I see that I'm going to have to continue processing that, because I do have this huge mutable T-square in my chart by default. And that will be hit in some way loosely by these retrogrades and the Mars and Jupiter placements. And I'm not forward to that. But also, like, I always have great realizations during those times. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, something that keeps coming up for me with, well, especially this week, which is interesting with everything going into Scorpio.
Mhm.
Anger has been a reoccurring theme. And it's been really interesting to see how the connection between anger and the way that we express it and the words that we use to express it are all connected, and how if we feel like we don't have the words to use to express it, then that's when we can feel like, oh, we're biting our tongue. And
Is it
it's,
even
that
real?
fire starting.
Is it even real? Is it even valid? Like, if you don't
Yeah.
believe it is on this mental processing level, then like you're not gonna express it. It's gonna like just like fuck with you up on the inside.
hmm And it like really, I had a situation yesterday. I don't think I told you about
Mm.
it.
Yeah.
I was mad. I was so frustrated. I was so mad. I can't think of the last time I've been this angry. And it was not over anything, even like, I'll just tell the story. So I woke up, fed my dogs, one of my dogs, Sunshine, tiny little chihuahua, 4 pounds. Um, she's taking antibiotics right now, and the syringe we're using to give it to her broke. So I needed a new one, but I was like, oh, the vet office I go to is closed until Monday because they're closed Fridays. And so I'm like trying to figure it out. And I work in veterinary medicine. So I'm like, okay, I'll just text, my friends who are at work at other practices and see if they're, if they can spare one and this and that. And I called one of the vets that we used to go to, and they weren't able, they were like, well, we didn't prescribe it, so we can't give you a syringe for it. But then they hung up on me. And that oh, I was like on fire after that. I was so mad. I was just like, this is a job I've done before. It's not, you didn't even do your job. It's not that hard. It's just insane. And it got to the point where I was like, I don't even know. I didn't even feel comfortable talking to anyone about it because I was so mad. I was like, I don't even feel like, I feel like my words are weapons right now. Like anything I say is like throwing a dagger, and I'm just going to be throwing it to anyone within earshot.
Yesterday? This was yesterday on Friday the 28th?
Yeah.
Wait, do you know what time it was?
It was earlier in the day. I did end up texting a friend who works at the shelter I used to work at, and I just stopped by and she gave me a few and told me where I could get some, you know, yeah. So I ended up being okay, but
Holy crap. No, it's because I was also having like this huge bout of anger yesterday too. And it was around like maybe 1 p.m. And like I was just going like balls to the wall ballistic off of like this like small thing that like a friend said that like sent me into this like trauma response like trigger.
yeah.
But like usually if I'm trauma responding, I don't get angry. I get kind of like upset or sad or anxious. But like I was just full on like, you can't talk to me that way. How dare you? I mean, I said it like a little like it's like how it came out though. Like internally, it felt like, how dare you, you fuck. But like externally, I was very cold and I was just like, you're wrong. Da 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 da. And like it was like a misunderstanding in some ways, but like she also took responsibility for like the things I was saying and that like I was like valid. It was just that like she actually wasn't at all trying to like do the thing that like I didn't even necessarily know if like I thought she was trying to do it. It was more just like in case you're gonna do it, da da da. Like and I'm just
Yeah.
never, I don't tell people off like unless it's like a stranger like harassing me. But like
Mhm.
my own friends, like I don't know. I think I have this like reflection that's been coming up that like I just like took too much shit growing up and like people just like bullied me because they didn't think or like they would bully me and because I would be like kind of like impenetrable seeming like vibes wise and then I would like blow up on them and then they wouldn't get why I was blowing up on it. So I think I've just been like crucified by like not having the words to articulate my experience before. So I
Mm.
feel like I was feeling all that rage up of like I'm never gonna let someone take advantage of me because they don't have the patience or the discernment to like hear what I'm saying or understand me. I'm not too
Yeah.
complex. Fuck you. Like it's been like this huge rectification of my past lately because I've been having like huge realizations like about like who I was as a kid and how like I really did a good job preserving my innocence, but at the same time, like I could have been more vocal and like stood up for myself more and believed it was my birthright, but I just like never believed that. I think Gemini actually helps me understand that because it's actually Mercury that like can go into the underworld, right?
Mhm.
Like it's like oh, it's interesting because Gemini is ruled by Mercury and Scorpio, like ruled by Mars and like also Pluto-y affiliations. So it's like Mercury can go into the underworld and come back out, and it's like
Which
that's
is like a big, big deal.
yeah, it's like that attachment. And I just feel like for me, this past week was like realizing that like I have always been good at like going to the underworld and like getting myself out, but I didn't like have the correct messaging in my head around it and like see my true worth and like ask for the respect from people that should be respecting me if like they claim to be a close friend. And it was like cool because like the person I was even experiencing that with, it was like they saw that I was like trauma responding and I just like needed like some reassurance. They also took
Mhm.
responsibility for like if I had been feeling taken for granted. They completely owned their shit. But I just realized also how like the fact that other people hadn't responded as well to them before was proof that my discernment was good and also proof that like not in a shameful way, but I really did deserve to speak my truth because it's something that can be received. Because I used to think, oh, if people can't handle my truth, I shouldn't be speaking it or something.
Oh,
Which is funny because then I would like maximize when I can speak it, but during conflict, I just would never feel like I had a right to my own perspective. Because I would like be friends with people like gaslit me, basically. So yeah.
yeah. It's definitely interesting to see like how much damage that words can do.
Mhm.
And especially psychologically with a lot of things in Scorpio right now, it's very psychological. It's very much like, it's not the same thing as getting punched in the head. It's getting a comment that you're thinking about and then for the next 3 years.
Oh my God, yeah.
Um,
Scorpio X
yeah, it's
Gemini.
yeah. um, so yeah, it just makes me keep thinking about how we respond to it. Um, so there were a few things that you said that I was going to build off of, and then
I think you're
uh,
like, whoa, in response to something, I think, with like the underworld thing. You're like, that's huge.
oh well, yeah, that is a big deal. So Mercury entering and leaving the underworld. No one else does that. Like no one else can do that. Not even Zeus. Like not even Big
Mhm.
Daddy Jupiter. Not allowed. Forbidden. Like that. I think is something that can be really valuable, especially thinking about, Mars is ultimately in a Gemini ruled sign and a Gemini ruled, a Mercury ruled. And so I think a lot of people don't see the power and just the power and just what a big force it is to be able to be flexible
Mhm.
and to be adaptable. Because if you can adapt so well that you can survive in both the underworld and the world of the living, I mean, that's incredible. That's incredible to me. So I'm thinking a lot about how, yeah, just how to deal with those experiences
Mhm.
and how to do it in a way that can keep you flexible. Because, so like you were talking about, like a lot of things you were talking about was like a trauma response that was brought up in like that one interaction. And I was thinking, I had a lot without getting too much into it when I got hung up on a few different responses going on. And um, yeah, just being able to speak about those things in a way where you realize, like, it wasn't even me, it was my dog that I felt like was being wronged, which
Mhm.
I feel like is like kind of dramatic, but I was like, this is not okay. Like,
Not okay.
I don't know. To me, it was like medical negligence, which is a bit dramatic, but I was just so frustrated. And it made me think of all the times where I hadn't been heard or I hadn't been taken seriously, especially in a medical context, because there's a lot behind that too. And it gets more, it doesn't feel so black and white because it's one of those things where you can be wronged, like wrong, not even like uncomfortable or perspective change. No, 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 no. Like you can just be wronged and like still be in a position where you can't speak about it in a way without being divisive or in a way with that might make it worse even. And
Mhm.
it's difficult because sometimes you have to just eat it, which is kind of fitting with the Scorpio Taurus focus that we've got with the Gemini, not Gemini, with the eclipse season. Um, and yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I feel like it's interesting how like all the conflict we've been having and all the like sort of mental recognitions of like things that we didn't get to have like when we were younger are all coming up, and it's like underworld tones. But like also it reminds me of justice, which I don't think is just a Libra thing. Like it reminds me of like rectifying and paying for like the past in a specific way, which I don't know what sign that is, but it does feel very Martian to me. Like, because if like war is some sort of, response to like a failed negotiation, right?
Mhm.
So it's like, if you're mad, there's some, in this context, it's like the past negotiations that didn't go through that could have served you and helped you and saved you. Let's do justice to them, bitch. It's kind of like the vibe it seems.
Yeah, it makes you think of how Venus was viewed as it's like unifying, and one of the ways that it was tied like to being a bride and to marriage was in the sense that they uh sometimes to make peace with two nations they would offer up someone in marriage, and then their marriage would symbolize like literally like the union of those two nations, and how this energy is more like a divorce.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
With everything going into Scorpio, it's like it's leaving Libra, it's leaving that like that marriage and that unified feeling, and things are, it has like a divorce energy. Um, yeah, and I think a lot too about how Lady Justice has the blindfold on, and there's a lot to be said about that, but it's kind of like we
Yeah,
can't
why
be,
does Justice have a blindfold on? Like the Lady
she
Justice.
can be impartial because you,
Oh, gotcha.
yeah, if she were to look at people and see them, then she would discriminate,
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
or it would open the door for that at least. So in order to stay impartial, she doesn't see them. Like she's kind of blind to certain things. And so there's a lot behind that. And there's a lot behind, I don't know, it's almost one of those things where it's like, it's not even a matter of right and wrong. It's a matter of something else.
It's a matter of fighting for what's yours and laying claim to that no matter what.
Like, what are you willing to, yeah, like Venus is viewed as, I don't know, people often forget Venus has a lot of significations of like the warrior and of a fighter, and of like they forget that one of the things that Venus will do in order to keep peace and to keep unity is go to war.
It's funny
That is
that we're talking about,
within character.
I was gonna say it's funny about Venus because we actually have not gotten to the other transit happening this week, which is Venus in Scorpio opposite Uranus retrograde in Taurus, which is
Such a good point.
which is also happening. But it's like we went naturally from Mars to Venus because they always kind of get talked about in a pair. But yeah, like what is your response then tying this Venus as a warrior thing to the opposition of Uranus and Taurus that's happened November 5th?
Yeah, definitely. I think because yeah, so we're talking about Mars and about like in Gemini and Mercury, and how just with Mars Mercury tension there can be like words, and it can feel like a conflict of words or an argument. You know, even to the extent of like a divorce, especially with everything else. And so to me, that feels like maybe that will be the energy of this week of kind of navigating through a sensitive time. And then once Venus opposes Uranus, I think it's going to be like, okay, what kind of new avenues and what kind of new perspectives and new takes can we take on this? Like, it's going to be less of, so to me, whenever I think of Scorpio Taurus, I think of medical astrology, how Taurus is like what we're eating, and then Scorpio is like what we're getting rid of, and the waste. So I feel like now is a time of like almost like constipation of like frustration or anger, and this week is just like blowing that all out.
Yeah, it seems like that. I do feel like Scorpio is about, it's funny because, you know, Pluto significations are Pluto clears and like Scorpio is like clearing the waste. And it also leads up to our next lunar eclipse in the full moon. Wait, is it lunar or solar? Hang on. No, it's lunar, yes. The lunar eclipse in Taurus, but which will also like, you know, be because the sun's opposing in Scorpio. It's like a lot of the Scorpio Taurus duality. So it's like the perfect time to like be thinking about like sort of like at what point is it you should be indulging and at what point should you be detaching. And I'm just thinking about that like interplay a lot because I feel like Uranus, I actually feel like during the new moon eclipse that just happened, I was thinking a lot about like what ideas about life I was letting go of and what I felt myself building towards, which fits with these Taurian themes, which the North Node being in Taurus is what have you been abstaining from that you should indulge yourself in? And like, I feel like I haven't indulged myself in being like disagreeable with conflict with my loved ones. And I haven't indulged myself in believing in myself. And I think these things are super important to like think about too when you're like tracking these oppositions and that, because the nodes like with the North Node in Taurus, I feel like society is like considered opulent here in the West, but it's like I think there's duality everywhere where it's like if you're opulent in some ways, you're completely like abstinent and like starved in other ways. So we should reverse that shit, you know? So I do think that like I look at like what in my life am I starving myself of that I should stop doing, you know?
Yeah.
And Venus is like, especially Venus is like doing like the opposition this week. I think of it as like, what do I value that I starve myself of?
Yeah, definitely. I think too a good thing to keep in mind is like Uranus has been in Taurus for a while now. And that whole time, I feel like it's been working with Venus to come up with unconventional and kind of, solutions that we didn't think would be possible, or outcomes we didn't think would be possible, or just, very Uranian, unusual, unpredictable way of movement. And I think too, it's a good time to mention like some thoughts on retrogrades in general that I have, if you think that sounds like a good idea.
Sure. I mean, we have like so many freaking Uranus, Jupiter, Mars, like,
I think people get kind of scared of retrogrades or kind of intimidated by them because they view them as like a complete 180 and like an opposite, when it can feel that way sometimes, but I think more often than not, it feels more like a like this planet could work to this capacity before, and while it's retrograding, it's working at this capacity. So it's like sometimes it's doing the same thing, but more intensely, or just more of the same thing. And then sometimes it is doing something the complete opposite. So I think it's more of just a fuller capacity thing rather than, liminal going forward and going back.
Oh, yeah. Let me think about that. I feel like I've always, yeah, I like that. I've always associated retrogrades as like the biggest thing they go against are your expectations. Because I feel like a lot of things in my life don't change during retrogrades, is what I've noticed. But those are the things that I don't have expectations around. I feel like if I have expectations, then like my entire world is just like sent into like insane, just like free fall territory. And so to pair with that, I feel like when your expectations don't get met, you have to expand as a result, because I think expectations make things narrow and stuff. So I feel like you talking about expanded capacity, it's kind of like, listen, if you don't want to let go of your expectations, then life will make you let go. Because life wants you to be like a flexible agent. And I do think that is kind of how I think about it. Like I don't know, like let go of expectations sounds like a coping mechanism in response to a retrograde, but I actually think it's like a it's like a good time to like be like, I can be whatever, and oops, let's like just let like laissez-faire, like let figure it out during this time. So I kind of like that duality, because like whatever I did have expectations about, I'm just gonna completely surrender during this time. And it's kind of fun to always be like sort of doing stuff then surrendering. Like when Saturn was in retrograde, I was completely just like, let your will be done, dude. And then the minute it went direct, I got like a job with an organization I've been eyeing for like almost years now. Turns out they've been watching me during retrograde, which when it started, I had just started like tweeting more and doing stuff. So it's actually really crazy, because I think that like my expectations of like how I should be making money and everything were just completely just like, fuck that, Crystal, like, all right, free falling. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's expectations is like a big thing for me, because there's a lot of weight behind expectations, and I think some people's response to disappointment with their expectations not working out is to get rid of them and to have no expectations. And maybe that works for some people, but I think for me that doesn't work well. Like I need more, because to me expectations are synonymous with hope and with something to look forward to. And even if it doesn't come to fruition, I think for what it's worth in the moment, before I even get there, it's worth it. And so I think it's a matter of staying flexible and staying open to like, what value is the expectation bringing you? Is it getting you through the current moment? And is it helping you now? Or is it something that you're using as a distraction for the future?
Yeah, no, that resonates. I feel like people are like, I have no expectations. They end up being very unmotivated to like do things, and your life like stops retaining structure. And I think that's like kind of like too much of an all or nothing approach. I think it's more like it's okay to have expectations, and it's also okay if your expectations don't get met.
Yeah.
For me, it's like not even like hope, which is very like, I don't even know, like Pisces areas of you. For me, it's more like literally you can't actually like live your life without any expectations. If I literally can't even like rely on my heart to continue pumping blood and for me to be alive, like can't plan anything with that. You know, it's like how in New York, as I've been adjusting, it's like I expect the trains to be coming. I'll pay attention to like the MTA. So if they don't come, I'll just make a new plan. So it's like, okay, I'm not like clenching to the expectation, but like if I was like, la la la, who knows if I'll even like make it to the station today? Like God could just take me right now. Like it's like that is like the most extreme version of no expectation. Can't
Yeah.
ex- it's like more like I can't expect things, is what people turn it into because it's like if you have no expectations, yeah, you don't have any life force then because you're like life will just never makes it's just like a fatalistic sort of thing. So I think retrogrades are more like let go of your expectations, which isn't the same as throwing them away and not having any, but just like don't clench to them because that will
Yeah,
just make your life miserable. No attachments, bruh. So yeah.
definitely. I guess there's more we could add on to, but I think we're starting to get low on time. What are you thinking?
Yeah, well, I think this is a good ending spot for now. It's like a shorter episode because it is a smaller week, but the rest of November is going to be insane. So this is
Yeah,
like a good breather for now.
yes, and we've got just to mention on that eclipse we mentioned is happening Tuesday, November 8th. So we'll talk more about that next week. And probably look at the chart for it and all that. Get into the nitty-gritty of it.
Yeah. All right. Well, see you guys next time.
See ya.